3 factory graveyard shift stories you won't believe. Every factory has a rhythm, doesn't it? A pulse that keeps beating long after the day's shift has gone home. There's the hum of cooling machinery, the groan of settling metal, the drip of condensation in those vast, empty spaces. But on the graveyard shift, when the building is practically a tomb and the silence is absolute, sometimes you can hear something else. The sound of stories trapped in the walls, of memories playing out on a loop in the dark. These places aren't what you see in the daylight. At night, a factory becomes a maze of shadows, a place where the line between your imagination and whatever's really out there gets awfully blurry. For the worker walking the floor alone, every unexpected noise becomes a footstep. Every flicker of a distant light becomes a pair of eyes, watching. Tonight, we have 3 stories for workers who clocked in for their shift, having no idea they wouldn't be alone. These are 3 factory graveyard shift stories you won't believe. Story 1. The haunting warning at the Tennessee factory. Our first story comes from a guy named John, who took a job at an old factory in rural Tennessee. The work was simple, the pay was good, and honestly, the quiet of the night shift suited him. The factory made heavy-duty parts for industrial equipment, so the main floor was this massive cavern of presses, lathes, and conveyor belts, all of them sitting silent and imposing in the gloom. For the first few weeks, the job was exactly what he expected. Quiet, maybe a little boring, and lonely. But that loneliness was about to turn into a different kind of feeling, a much more unsettling one. It started small, a flicker of movement in the corner of his eye, a sound that was just a little out of place, a metallic scrape from a part of the factory he knew was totally empty. He'd just shake his head and blame it on being tired and isolated. But then came the feeling, a sudden, crushing sense of dread that would just wash over him for no reason. It was a cold, heavy presence, like a storm cloud gathering in the room, making the hair on his arms stand right up. One night, while making his rounds, the feeling was worse than ever before. The air felt thick and cold, and the normal hum of the factory just stopped, dead silence. That's when he heard it, clear as day. Footsteps, echoing from the far end of the empty floor. Heavy, rhythmic steps, like steel-toed boots on concrete. But he was the only one there. He called out, his voice sounding tiny and weak in the huge space. The footsteps stopped. A second later, he heard a whisper, a faint hissing sound that seemed to weave its way between the silent machines. His heart was hammering his ribs. He grabbed his heavy flashlight, its beam cutting a shaky path through the darkness. He walked slowly toward where the sounds came from, a section of the floor with a massive hydraulic press. As he got closer, a shape peeled itself away from the shadows of the machine. It was a tall, dark figure, a silhouette of a man that seemed to drink the light around it. John froze, his breath caught in his throat. The shadow figure darted with this unnatural speed, weaving between the machines before it just dissolved into the darkness. He stood there for a long time, just him and the beam of his own flashlight, his mind scrambling to understand what he'd just seen. The next morning, still shaken, he tracked down one of the daytime supervisors, an older guy who'd worked there for over 30 years. John hesitated, not wanting to sound like he was losing it, but finally told him what happened. The supervisor's friendly face just fell. He told John that years ago, a worker had been killed in a terrible accident at that exact hydraulic press. The man was working a double, completely exhausted, and he made one fatal mistake. Ever since, rumors had been passed around by the old-timers. Other night shift workers over the years had reported the exact same things. That sudden feeling of dread, the phantom footsteps, and a glimpse of a shadow darting between the machines. They believed it was the ghost of the worker, forever walking his final shift. John never finished his next one. What an unsettling thought. It seems some spirits just can't bring themselves to clock out. Our next story takes us to a large foundry, where one worker found out that the scariest things on the night shift aren't always ghosts. Story 2: The Silent Intruders and the Rolling Barrel. For a maintenance worker at a huge foundry, the graveyard shift was its own little world. The daytime noise of grinding, smelting, and machinery was gone, replaced by an eerie quiet. All you'd hear were the groans of cooling metal and the distant hum of vents. He and his partner were used to the strange knocks and bangs of the building settling around them. They learned to ignore it. But one morning, a look at the security footage turned that casual attitude into pure, chilling fear. The tape from the night before showed two figures, armed and dressed in black, moving like ghosts through the shadows of the foundry. They had been inside the factory with the two workers for hours, hiding among the machinery, just watching. The maintenance worker and his buddy had been completely oblivious, doing their rounds while, just feet away, a very real and violent threat was lying in wait. The intruders were never caught, and no one ever figured out what they wanted. The sheer dumb luck that they hadn't run into them, that a deadly confrontation had been avoided, was terrifying. Suddenly, the fear wasn't about ghosts anymore. It was about the very real dangers lurking in the isolation of the night. But the factory wasn't done with him. A few weeks later, he was working a shift alone. There'd been a small accident earlier, and a bunch of barrels and crates had toppled over. After he finished cleaning up, he stood for a moment in the silence. And then, from across the floor, one of the heavy steel barrels started to move. It didn't just tip. It rolled slowly and deliberately across the concrete. It moved in a perfectly straight line, like an invisible hand was guiding it, before it came to a gentle stop right next to his feet. He stared at it, frozen. There was no slope, no vibration, nothing that could possibly explain it. As he stood there, a new sound came from a dark storage area nearby. A faint, ethereal female voice. It was just a whisper, too soft to make out words, but it was a voice. The combination of the real-world terror he'd just been through and this blatant, impossible event was just too much. His heart pounding, he checked the security cameras later. The footage was undeniable. It clearly showed the barrel rolling across the empty floor with absolutely nothing near it. That was his last graveyard shift. The psychological toll was too much, and the company, freaked out by the footage and the story of the intruders, got rid of the solo graveyard shift soon after. He quit not long after that, unable to shake the feeling of being watched by both the living and the dead. That feeling of being watched is a unique kind of fear, one that only comes from being alone in a place that's supposed to be full of life. If these stories are getting under your skin, do me a favor and hit the like button and subscribe for more true, unsettling stories. And if you have a story of your own that the world needs to hear, you can submit it to the email in the description below. Story 3: The Elevator That Waits. Our final story isn't one of abject terror, but of a quiet, persistent, and deeply weird phenomenon that messed with a factory worker for months. This guy worked in a multi-story manufacturing plant, and his job meant he had to use the building's old industrial freight elevator all the time. Soon after he started, he noticed something odd. Multiple times, as he'd be walking toward the elevator at night, the heavy steel doors would just slide open right before he got there, as if someone inside saw him coming and hit the button. But every single time, the elevator car was completely empty. At first, he chalked it up to coincidence or a faulty sensor, but it just kept happening, and only for him. He'd be walking down the long, empty hall, and like clockwork, just as he was a few feet away, ding, the doors would part, revealing the vacant, dimly lit car. It was so punctual, it was unnerving, almost polite. It got to the point where he started to expect it, like a strange, silent greeting from the building itself. One night, things got even stranger. He was walking toward the elevator when he saw, through the small wire mesh window in the door, the silhouette of a person inside. Relieved that there was finally a rational explanation, he picked up his pace and called out, "Hey, can you hold the door?" Right as he reached it, the doors, which had started to close, slid back open. He stepped inside, ready to thank the other person, but the elevator was empty. He was completely alone. He just stood there, confused and seriously unnerved. He had seen someone. It wasn't a glance. It was the clear shape of a person standing right where he was now. Thoroughly spooked, he went to security the next day and asked them to pull the camera footage. What they found defied all logic. The tape showed the employee walking toward the elevator and calling out. The doors opened for him, exactly like he said. But a few moments before he got there, the footage showed something else. The elevator had arrived, the doors had opened, and a mysterious figure wearing a trench coat and an old-fashioned fedora stepped out. The figure walked calmly down the hall and straight out of the building. The security team played it back again and again. No one on staff knew who it was. There was no record of a visitor, and no one dressed like that had worked in the factory for decades. After that, the staff started joking about it. They called the entity the polite ghost, an apparition that haunted the elevator and was always willing to hold the door. But for the worker who lived it, it wasn't a joke. It was a constant, unsettling reminder that in the dead quiet of the factory night, you might be alone, but something is always watching. Conclusion. So the next time you're alone on the late shift, when the building settles around you and the machinery sighs in the darkness, remember these stories. Remember the phantom footsteps in Tennessee, the silent intruders in the foundry, and the polite ghost in the elevator. And listen closely to the whispers of the factory. You might be surprised by what you hear. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to share your own experiences in the comments below, and subscribe for more tailies from the dark.